Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing out there? So welcome to the International Film Festival Rotterdam, the 54th edition. Nice to see you here. My name's Michelle Carey. I'm part of the selection committee for the features at the festival. And welcome to this big talk with Alex Ross-Perry and Peter Strickland. So I'm going to take a seat and get right into introducing our guests. Let's go. So, Peter Strickland is a British writer and director who, with his unique style across 5 features and several shorts and music videos, has been described by critic Anton Bittel as the ultimate mesmerist and hierophant. I've always wanted to say that word on stage, it's great. His feature films, all from his own screenplays, are set in often hermetic, possibly imaginary worlds, blurring the lines of reality and dreamscapes and fantasy. Referencing genres such as horror, soft porn, giallo, and satire, while not exactly clearly fitting into any of these boxes, his work is always informed by a deeply cinephilic drive, a love of the visual and oral magic that cinema conjures, particularly the underground and European cinema of the 60s and 70s, but also taking some surprising influences at time, which we can perhaps discuss. They're also infused with a cheeky sense of humor and underappreciated shrewd observations of humanity's foibles, used to great effect in his more recent satirical films. Please welcome to the stage, Peter Strickland. And next we have, I think, a major filmmaker working in independent US cinema today, who is visiting Rotterdam for the first time. Alex Ross-Perry has made 9 features, 3 of them non-fiction-ish, and 2 of them screening in our program this year. Pavements, which has another screening on Saturday, I believe, and Videoheaven, which he's well premiering here, which is screening also tomorrow and Saturday. Tickets still available. They are, as Canadian critic Adam Naiman has designated them both, rigorous works of pop cultural scholarship whose respective forms are appropriate to their subject matter. Alex's films are known for their sharp dialogue, acerbic observational wit, and recognizable visual style, also in debt to a certain aesthetic of US and European cinema of the 70s and 80s, but very much with his own stamp on it, transcending again the genres of comedy, drama, concert film, if that's a genre, or psychological horror. He has worked with some of the greatest American actors of the last 20 years, including Jason Schwartzman, Chloe Sevigny, Caitlin Scheel, and Elizabeth Moss. And he's equally a sharp scriptwriter and has written scripts for many other filmmakers, but always with his own signature. We are so happy to have Alex at IFFR this year. Please welcome him to the stage.
Thank you.
And I should say you are both working so hard this year at the festival, so thank you for joining us in this late stage of the festival. It's really special. And so you've both been working in cinema across 3 decades now. Peter, if I may say, 4 decades, if you can believe it. So we're not going to do a deep dive here into every single one of your films, obviously, or your respective filmographies, but I thought it would be interesting to bring you both together in this setting, as I suspect there may be some interesting points of convergence, even though your films may not have circulated in the same spheres of the film industry. And we're sort of inspired by the format of the IFFR 25 encounters that we put together a couple of years ago in putting filmmakers together. So I'd like to keep this very conversational. Please jump in when the other's talking if you have any questions. We're also going to show some clips, and we're also going to have time at the end for some audience questions. So it may seem kind of the prosaic thing to ask, but I'm always interested to know how people come into their métier. And so I wanted to ask maybe, Peter, with yourself about your beginnings, how you got into film. I believe you were sort of even considering more possibly a career in like music video direction, that kind of thing. So what was the turning point that you pivoted to cinema in?
Well, Eraserhead, that was the film for me. I was 16 and I hadn't seen anything like that before. So before that I was watching, I think, Tom Cruise and Cocktail, which, I still like that film, it's great, but that was just a very huge leap from one to the other. And I guess I was into films in my head. It's a bit embarrassing. In my head, I was making top tens of imaginary films, and with no intention to become a filmmaker. But you get to a point and you think, oh, hang on, I've got all these imaginary films or trailers in my head. Maybe there's something I can do here. And Eraserhead really gave me this direction. That was in 1990, and my first feature was 19 years later, so it took a little bit of time to get there. But I started off with Super 8. I joined this local filmmakers club that were doing kind of amateur day trips, to the zoo, and they'd film it on Super 8, custard pie films, that kind of stuff. And I was a total snob, I was sneering at them, discreetly, of course. But and now I look back on it and I think, oh, you know what? Actually, all that stuff, it's probably gone, and it's a real shame, because I think there was a love in those films, and I regret, I was just, I don't know, like a pretentious 16-year-old. So yeah, I got this camera off one of the club members, £15. You'd buy the cartridges, and just bit by bit, I'd do stuff in my bedroom with friends, and eventually I got to do stuff on 16mm, which was in 1995, so 5 years later, which got me into Berlin in 97, but there was another 12 years between that and my first feature, which, like most things in life, came from inheritance, sadly, especially in this day and age.
Right, so it was there right from the beginning. And Alex, for you, was it always cinema?
Yeah, I never really liked anything else except for comic books and punk music. When I was a teenager, I don't even remember when I heard that you could go to school for movies, but of course I grew up and certainly came of age as a movie watcher in the second half of the 1990s, where in America there was a great amount of independent movies that were sort of changing the landscape of what seemed possible. So I feel fortunate that, for lack of a better word, like the post-Pulp Fiction world, was that there was a lot of very peculiar and idiosyncratic films being made that, as Peter's saying with Cocktail, you just have to at some point realize that there's more. And for me, it was because that was the time. So I also continue to love mainstream things, but being a video store regular, having access to what now seem like very big movies, but at the time seemed like very small and personal films, was very fortunate. And then very specifically, so when I was in 8th grade, so I don't know what the schools are like here, but in America, you go to one school until you're in 8th grade, and then from 9th grade to 12th grade, you're in high school. And the high school in my town had a cable access TV station, broadcast from the basement and run by students. And when I was in middle school, before I even got there, I would watch this. And if you've seen Wayne's World, you have a sense of what the cable access was like. It was guys in band t-shirts, being silly, playing loud music, doing pranks, making little shot on VHS and SVHS short films. And I worshiped these guys. I worshiped their style, I worshiped the videos they were making, and each episode of their comedy show was 20 minutes. And it was on every Thursday, and then Friday through Sunday, they would make a news show that would just air in a loop throughout the whole town. So I watched the whole weekend of cable access, and just all I wanted to do was get to high school and join the studio, which I did. And then from immediately high school, so for 4 years, I was just in that studio every day. And then ultimately 5 days a week staying after school, because then I had the show. And me and my friends made like 35 episodes of our own weekly TV show spread out over 2 years that aired on Thursdays. Then I was the director of the news program. And all those people that I grew up watching had gone to film school. And I wanted to do that. So I did. And, watching cable access entertainment made by 16-year-olds who seemed like the oldest, coolest kids in the world was more important to me in some ways, because that I knew I could do next year. That wasn't something I needed to wait 19 years for. As soon as I got to school, I could get my hands on a camera and edit VCR to VCR. And then, you know, all the rest followed, NYU, first feature.
So that was your Eraserhead, these cable.
In a way, I mean, it was. And Eraserhead was also my Eraserhead, but, or really for me, the one that grabbed me in that realm was Blue Velvet, just because I saw it first. Because also,
these tapes still exist?
of my show? Yeah, I have them on DVD too. My dad had them all converted a couple years ago. I have the whole series. You know.
Sorry, then you went to...
And then all the rest happened, you know, just making movies.
You can Google it.
Micro budget, less micro budget, bigger, and then smaller. And then here I am 15 years later.
And so before we get into talking about your visual styles, respectively, I want to ask you also about writing and screenwriting, because you're both very serious about screenwriting. You're brilliant screenwriters. And you also do, from time to time, write scripts for other filmmakers. I mean, your films feel so literary to me. Maybe, Alex, we can start with you. You have such an excellent way with words. I mean, you never thought to become, like, a novelist?
Well, I'm afraid of that because I don't know how to do it. And in as much as I'm saying I spent from the age of 12 onward coveting one thing, I think it'd be very hard to 20 years later say I want to do something even harder to master. And also, like, when you write a novel, people would read every word, and that's really daunting. Scripts, people don't read them at all. Most people don't read a script in their whole life, and if they know anything from a script, they only know the dialogue. That's why the scripts that get acclaimed are usually terrible, but have clever plots or quirky words in them, even though they're terribly written. They're poorly considered and badly structured and just, they're not good. But the audience only sees a quarter of the script. So it'd be really daunting to imagine every word being something that people could scrutinize. But the writing thing for me is like, it's just changed even since making like the Color Wheel in 2010 and such, but the thing that hasn't changed that is like, I've always wanted, and this is a snob thing as well, as you're saying, like the goal for me being a contrarian in film school was always, I have to be inspired by something different. If everyone's inspired by films and they just want to make a film that's like a film they like, I have to be inspired by a novel because that is different and it's smarter and cooler and better. And I did that for many films. And then with something like Her Smell, it was like, I have to be inspired by a play, the structure of a play, but also of the feeling of a CD, like a specific CD you would hold in your hands at a used music store in 1998. And I have to make a movie that feels like theater, but also feels like this $8.99 used alternative rock CD. And it's less like writing is this or writing is that, but the thing I'm always excited by is like, this has to just not be, I can't be inspired to write a script based on a script. Like that just doesn't make any sense to me at all. It has to be a convergence of other things that I am at that moment trying to find the narrative purpose of. And that could be anything.
And when you sit down, I don't know, in my mind, you're sitting down to some old vintage typewriter, may not be the case. Do you enjoy the process? Like, and how long do you spend on a script generally? I mean, I guess there's a difference between your own films and writing for someone else, but do you like sitting down writing?
I used to, but now that it's just my job, you know, you can't like your job. So I don't anymore because now it's just simply what I do for a living. Which is sad because it used to really be fun. But then again, it was fun when it was what I did at the end of the day after doing other things. Now that it's what I do at 10 in the morning at my desk, nothing you could do that way will be fun. I don't know. I don't know how enjoyable it is or can be. Yeah, I don't know. I think I don't have an answer to that that's anything other than just sad. But like the earlier movies were written on a typewriter, a stream of consciousness, essentially. And I would get like a 20, 30-page pile of pages and then turn that into the computer script. And the computer script is like draft 2. So no one reads draft one because draft one is unreadable. And that was like a very personal communication between me and a machine that only does one thing. And if I were to write something like organic again, I would do that process. I just haven't done that for years. But I don't know. Peter's answer is probably better. I mean, it's just like, yeah, it's just hard to say now because I became harder on myself than I ever thought I would be. And the process of writing became more daunting than I thought it would be because even Queen of Earth, even watching a minute of it, I can just see that we filmed like the third draft. Whereas now I wouldn't even send out something that I hadn't worked on for a long, long time that I felt had been perfected. Whereas previously I was making movies that the joy of them was that they were very spontaneous. I wrote it, 6 months later we were shooting it. And that used to be really fun. Now that would horrify me, and I wouldn't do that. But, you know, I've always felt, and this is the last thing I'll say, like, and then Paul Schrader said the same thing, like, how long does it take to write a script? 2 years, but only the last 2 weeks are spent writing it. Like, it's just, if an idea's in my head, the last thing I want to do is write it until I've thought about it forever. And then when I sit down to do it, it's done. It's just transcribing a completed thing that lives in my head.
Now it's 1 minute, because I saw his recent post on social media saying to ChatGPT, give me a Paul Schrader script. I think in less than a minute it came out, and he was shocked at how good it was.
He's always on the cutting edge. We should all look at him for inspiration.
And Peter, what's your process for writing? Because you also write so much. Every time I talk to you, you're like, I'm writing.
I mean, what Alex just mentioned about Paul Schrader, that's so true. I mean, the gestational period for a script is mostly in your head, and it's just, you just got to dislodge it, and eventually just, you know, you just vomit it out somehow. I mean, they vary really, and now I do different types of scripts. So how I write now, well, how I write as a job for other people is very different from how I write for myself.
Did you talk about both?
Yeah, sure. Well, I don't want to get myself out of a job, so I love both. You know, everything's great. So maybe doing it for myself is doing it by yourself is slightly better. But I think it's just I mean, just the nature of whether it's good or bad. Just because it's personal to you and it's coming from you, it's just a bigger deal. You might get less money for it. But you have that umbilical connection to the work. I mean, I used to do what Lynch did. He used to kind of write like just one line for a scene. If he had like 70 scenes, he had a film, and I used to do that. That's how I started off. But then I veered away from that. I usually write chronologically. I start on page 1. I don't write treatments, which is not the done. Well, treatments are the done thing in the British film industry. I find that really odd because so much of writing is discovery. I don't know what my characters... I know what my characters are, but I don't know what they're going to do. And I don't know what situations they're going to find themselves in. And I think the beauty of writing is by the time you get to sort of page 30, things turn into kind of autopilot and things just surprise you. A lot of my stuff in my films, I didn't plan it. And I think by writing a treatment and just following that treatment just kills that spontaneity. When I write for other people, it's very much mostly commission. Adapt this book, adapt whatever, this or that. And it's just a very different process because you're doing it to please people, which I don't mind. It's a job, it's nothing to do with me. So when I have those meetings, I just do whatever they want. I can be whatever they want me to be. Whereas when it's my stuff, I get a bit offended if someone tells me what to do. So yeah, I do enjoy writing for hire. I'd rather make my own stuff, but that's just not possible unless you're rich. I think it's a very good second job to have, and it kind of informs my main job. I like the lifestyle. I don't like getting on the train, especially British trains, which are always late, and you can't get a seat, and you feel like vomiting by the time you get off because you're just standing like this for an hour. So I really think it's a blessing to work from home. I think the downside is it's quite sedentary, and I eat a lot of chocolate when I work. And you know, I'm in my 50s now. It's like, okay, diabetes is kind of like looming over me at one point.
The home snacking, the working at home is great and terrible for that reason.
Yeah.
Can't. Some days the day ends, it's dinner time, and all I've done all day is eat. But you're hitting on something that is essential, and I can't believe that I've become one of these people as a writer, but like when I see movies that don't work for me, I just have to say, like, the problem with this movie is the script doesn't work. And I hate being that person, because that is like an old, bitter screenwriter teaching film school. But the problem with movies that I can't connect with is that the script is bad and it just doesn't work. And I'm not a very articulate viewer or reviewer of movies, that even the ones I love or hate, but the only thing I can ever articulate is, here is why this script does not work for me, or here is why this script is very exciting to me. And everything in the middle I have really no thoughts on. If something's functional, it's functional. But when I see something, is this being like broadcast? Or like,
Yeah, but we could probably cut stuff.
Let's just say that there was a very popular movie that came out very recently, that in the 2 hours that you watch the film, if you've ever seen another movie, there is not a single moment that you are not 1 hour ahead of the characters. And every second I spent watching this movie was torture, because I am not the world's most prolific viewer, but I have seen a movie before. And I have seen movies in this genre. And the entire experience of watching this turgid film is being 90 pages ahead of every single character in every single scene. And this, to me, is unforgivable. And I could not get over this from 10 minutes into the movie. And this is something that makes a movie unwatchable, in my opinion. Whereas...
Too much snacking for the screenwriter, maybe that's why.
Or just, too much who knows what. And then, like, I see something else that is clearly a very cliche structure for a story, but it is going in directions that I'm not aware of, even though it's very clear where it's going. But I can enjoy it because there's an unpredictability to the writing. And to your point of working for others, the problem is no one knows anything. And this is a real problem. So I had a writing job where from the minute I was hired, I was told, this film is our North Star. This is our reference. This is what the director wants. This is what we want. The film they're referencing is one of my all-time favorites. Easily in the top 10 most movies I've seen, I've rewatched the most. And I said, this is in me on a molecular level. The film they're referencing is over 2.5 hours long. I rewrite a script, I turn it in, it is 155 pages, very close to the length of the film that they say we want our movie to be just like. And they say this is 25 pages too long. And I said, but if it's the movie you love, that I love, if that movie was 130 minutes, it would be terrible. What we love about that is its digressive quality, is its lack of plot propulsion. That movie has no plot. That movie is about characters, and it's about time, and it's about a place. Your movie has a plot. It has a thing that has to happen, that needs to be accomplished, and a resolution. So while you are worshiping this other film, you don't understand that this is the most incompatible reference you could come up with. And if that movie had a plot and was 25 minutes shorter, it wouldn't be good at all. And they were like, wow, we've been talking about this movie for years. No one's ever articulated it like that. And it's like, this is just obvious to me. You can't have a ticking clock, will this thing succeed or not movie, and have your reference point be a plotless movie about people moving through time. And these people thought that was possible. And you have to know that in order to explain to people what you can deliver to them. And then they just stopped talking about this movie that had been their reference all along.
Well done. So we're going to show a clip from, Peter, your latest film to date, Flux Gourmet. And I want to ask you, I don't know if you want to say a few words before we show the clip, why you selected this particular clip.
I guess that film is all about taboos, all kinds of bodily taboos, and we have this new expression from in recent years, the edgelord thing of are you shocking for the sake of shocking? Why are you smashing this particular taboo? And I guess when I wrote the film, it came out of frustration, really. I mean, on one level, it is a band movie. It's like a Spinal Tap film. On another level, it's something more serious. It's something about food and how food is sometimes the enemy of the body. And when we look at allergies and intolerances and so on, which is a very serious thing and an increasingly common thing. But cinema is yet to catch up. It's done as a joke. Someone has an anaphylactic shock, and we're kind of meant to laugh at it. And it's like, well, this person's about to die, so there's nothing funny about that. And I think, you know, I mean, I'm not saying you should ban those films, but I'm just saying there was no alternative to that. And so I guess I was looking at the symptoms of celiac disease, and one of the many symptoms is bloating, flatulence. And, you know, in cinema that's done as a joke. I mean, not the symptoms of celiac disease, but, you know, farting is the great frat boy tradition. You know, I'd be the first to say that's a lot of fun. You know, I think a well-timed fart is brilliant. But how can we take that and give it this dignity, which has never, to my knowledge, hasn't happened before? How do you turn it into something serious? I'm not sure, I don't know if I've succeeded or not. But with Makis, the actor, we spoke a lot about this, you know, how to talk about a subject that is usually associated with, you know, comedy and grossness.
You're the only filmmaker I can think of who sort of has these very specific genres. I mean, it's not that you will make like a horror film. You make the Giallo Foley film, or you make a kinky lesbian soft porn film, or the Sonic Catering Band avant-garde residency film that's also a film about celiac disease genre, or The Killer Red Dress. But each film has your signature style. And I'm just very curious sort of how you come to these very specific topics. Where do they come from?
I wish I knew. I should ask ChatGPT to help me out. I don't know. I mean, I guess when we start these things, you don't have this long-term plan. Each film pretty much comes by itself. Maybe Berberian is different because that was already stacked up. I'd already written that before Cutland Varga was finished. I guess I just explore stuff that interests me, and it's not a very good answer. I know.
Do they come from dreams or anywhere mysterious?
You know, something like Berberian Sound Studio. It came from a mixture of places, but one of them was being a fan of tape composition, avant-garde music, and how when I used to play it. If I'd play it in a bar, you know, people would get quite rude, you know, they would insult me. But if you put it to a film, people congratulate you. It's a very different it's all about context, and I think it goes back to what we just saw with Flux Gourmet. Context is everything. And how, if you think of Penderecki's music, on its own, most people would just walk out the room, but when Kubrick used it, when Lynch used it, it's like, wow, this is really igniting the imagination. So Berberian kind of came out of that, and about the association of sounds. You know, when you slice a cabbage, in the Western world we call that an innocent sound you associate with the kitchen, whereas in the Foley artist's context, it's the sound of murder. And, you know, I didn't really want to make a film about murder, but I wanted to kind of explore the mechanics of screen violence, and without being too didactic, perhaps. So, yeah, I mean, as I go along, I don't really... I mean, what is interesting... I mean, Alex, I'm sure you can relate to this as well. I mean, once you make a film, you're quickly pigeonholed within that. So when I made Berberian Sound Studio, I just got offered a lot of, you know, there's a Ted Bundy film. Do you want to do that? And it's like, oh, no, thank you. Duke of Burgundy, first page, an 18-year-old girl getting whipped, and it's like, I'm not even going to read page 2. You know, so it's a little bit of that going on, that people just hone in on you, and it's hard to kind of break out of that.
Has that slowed down now that they don't know how to pigeonhole you?
Oh, it's very frustrating. I'm trying to write I've written a romance, like you know, it's like a Douglas Sirk romance, nothing kinky, nothing dark, just a romance, and nobody wants to go near it. So whatever, you know, it's just the way it goes.
And Alex, you also work with, I guess, slightly more classical genres within the field of, let's say, art house cinema. You know, the road movie comedy with The Colour Wheel, or with the breezy romantic drama with Golden Exits, or almost the campus film, if that's a genre with listener Philip, but you always bring a very particular sensibility. It's this sort of same but different approach. I mean, both of you are like this. You're not like Ozu, where every film looks very similar. Like, and I'm interested to know, like, where do you find, like, how do you decide you want to do this genre next or that one?
I don't know. I mean, those movies are all so long ago now. Like, my memory of what I was thinking is only my memory of how I've answered that question before, rather than my actual memory of what I was thinking. But I think for better or worse, the problem with like having an evolving body of work that, as you say, spans 6, 7, 8, 9 movies is like, most of them are just defined by movies I wanted to see at that time. And of course, the movies a 25-year-old wants to see are of no interest to me now. So therefore, neither are the ones I made that I thought, like, I have to make this because this is exactly what I want to see. To look at it now, it would just seem like, well, that's what a 25-year-old wants to watch. I'm 40, I don't care about this. And that's kind of how I feel looking back at anything I've done prior to the last year or two. Because yeah, it's like, I mean, even these new movies like that are here, Videoheaven, obviously that took over a decade, but that was me seeing Los Angeles Plays Itself and thinking, I'd like to make a movie like that one day. And that's a very relatable instinct, I think, to any creative person. And you know, you have musicians that make guitar-driven music, and one day they think, I kind of want to make like an electronic album. And they're allowed to do that, and those things often backfire on them, but the history tends to justify the experiment. And yeah, I mean, Golden Exits, like, I guess at some point in New York, like there was just a massive revival of the sort of, at that time, long, unavailable, later Eric Rohmer films, and I just must have had the idea, like, I'd like to make a movie like this. It's very simple. Camera doesn't do a lot. Dialogue carries the story, split up into a sort of very clear time-driven structure. I'd like to do something like that. And a year later, I was making it, and that's not a thought I would ever have again. It's not like, oh, I found my voice. It's more just like, I'd like to see something kind of like that, but done in this way. And then I do it, and I've seen it, and I have no interest in it anymore, because it's never exactly what I wanted to see until the 2 movies that are playing here, which turned out just right. But and those are the ones that turned out like I wanted to see this movie, and now I've seen it, and I'm like, good, I'm glad I can watch this. But yeah, I mean, it's also just boredom. Like, it's just, I don't know. I can't put it into words because the films here are new things for me. They're new styles of filmmaking for me. One of them, Pavements, I think is just a new style of film in general. And that just comes from restlessness. Restlessness is having made half a dozen narrative or narrative-ish movies, and restlessness as a viewer. I watch a movie every day if I can, and I'm very bored by a lot of them. And the desire is there as a viewer, I must see something different. And as a storyteller, it's like I just have to think of something different. And that is now running me into a wall because I don't really know how many more different things I can invent or try to find my own voice within. I didn't invent the essay film, I just wanted to make one. That's not an instinct most narrative filmmakers would ever have. And if they did have it, they would say, I don't really care to learn how to do that. It's like learning another language. I couldn't learn another language. Every attempt I ever made in school failed. But I can learn another filmmaking language, and that's my version of teaching myself something that I would like to be fluent in. Like that 2 minutes of this movie when Robert Greene edited it, and this took a long time to get right, was what you just saw is the result of like 4 years of planning consolidated into 2 minutes, where essentially the framework for this movie is following this band on their contemporary reunion tour. You see them as older guys, staging a jukebox musical of their songs rearranged and performed by Broadway actors, having famous actors depict the band in a phony biopic that only exists within the framework of my movie, but which I also wrote and directed, and staging a museum opening with a tribute show featuring younger musicians playing Pavement songs. And what we've consolidated into 2 minutes here compresses those things which took place, if you include the archival footage, over 25 years. If you just look at the stuff I did, took place over 2 years. And it does that because I had said to Robert, the structure of this movie must resemble Dunkirk, one of the most structurally incredible, miraculous scripts ever written, easily. And this is a movie, this is a $100 million World War II film, that to me, making this documentary, I thought, this has to be my influence. This is everything to me. This is a movie, if you haven't seen it, if you haven't seen it recently, has 3 storylines. The one that takes place over a week, one that takes place over a day, and one that takes place over an hour. And like 80% of the way through the movie, all 3 of them converge at the same point at the same time. And I've never seen anything like this done in a script before. And it works when you read it, and it works when you watch it. And it is a magic trick. And I said this is what this movie needs to be. And when you reach this point in the film, which is like 90 minutes into a 130-minute movie, everything we've set up in these spinning plates have collapsed into one montage set to the same song, which I asked all of the tribute bands, you have to perform this together. So you're seeing 4 women from 4 different bands playing this song. It had to be prominent in the musical. We had to have our biopic actors learn it, and we knew that the band would be playing it. And we knew that we had it in ample archival. And there had to be this moment where these 5 threads intertwined around this one song based on a comment that Stephen Malcolmus made to me offhand, where he said, I always felt like that would be a kind of Pied Piper song, where I'm at a festival and everyone's there to listen to EDM and do Molly, and I start playing Grounded, and suddenly everyone is quiet, and then they follow me. And I thought, we can't do that, but I can create a moment comparable to the emotion you just described. And it took 2 years of planning to have that material, to intercut into that sequence. And again, like talking about the narrative challenges of convincing others what a script should be, this is the challenge that is interesting to me now, where I had to write the musical in order to get the song performed. I had to write the biopic. I had to shoot this, shoot that. And this is more interesting to me than solving a scene. This is solving a moment that I know the end result is that moment in Dunkirk when everything converges. I have no idea how we'll get there. I just know that when we start the edit, we have executed everything we need to hopefully pull off this edit. And it's very simple when you watch it. There's no pyrotechnics in the filmmaking. But it is the result of things being done over years of making this one movie. And this, to me, now is the ultimate challenge of storytelling, is how to find the opportunity to do something that groundbreaking, not in the world, but in your own experience.
Do you feel like this is the new thing animating your filmmaking, is sort of setting yourself these personal challenges or games or puzzles, and how you can sort of break boundaries and move forward as a filmmaker rather than writing a really nice, perfect script?
Certainly. And, you know, I've removed myself in this film from the image, the shot, the master shot, the coverage, getting the line, the perfect cut point in the scene. Like, I've removed all of that because it's uninteresting to me now, because the best examples of that being done well are no longer being done well. They're just being done the way things have always been done. And this is boring if you watch a lot of movies. And the challenge, I mean, I say this humbly, but not that humbly, because this was hard as hell to make. You've never seen something like what you just saw before, because it is basically not legally clearable, except through the loopholes we jump through, to cut between documentary footage that you actually filmed, archival footage, a Broadway, New York stage production off Broadway, and SAG actors performing scripted scenes. You've never seen that done before, ever, until I made this movie. And I learned the reason for that. It's legally almost impossible. And it's just complicated. It just takes time. But I wanted to try to collapse different forms of filmmaking into cohesive story beats rather than write a single story beat and subject it to traditional forms of filmmaking, simply out of restlessness to just try something unusual.
Well, the bar's been set high. Who here has seen Pavements, by the way? Oh, cool. I really hope you can all see it at the festival. It's really brilliant, and that's why I selected that clip. It's just such a feat of editing. And the other thing I really love about the film that clip demonstrates is also just, you really use the songs. Like, you're not afraid to play like a 4-minute song in its entirety.
And we cut that off pretty.
Yeah,
That's like a
okay,
6-minute song that we definitely
No, but a lot of,
fade out.
you know, I mean, not to compare it to other music documentaries, but people are afraid to do that, and there's such joy in that, which brings me to talking to you both about music, because I know music means a lot to both of you. And I'd just love to talk a bit more about that, because I know we're at a film festival and people probably ask you all the time about film, but I'd really also love to know how music has informed the way you make films. I mean, maybe, Peter, we start with you. Obviously, a lot of your feature films, you've actually commissioned scores by quite well-known indie acts in the UK, and I'm curious to know why you went that route rather than just like the traditional sort of classical, you know, orchestral score or whatever.
I couldn't get John Williams' number, I don't know. Yeah, I was just a fan. I think it started off, I think the first film, it was very much informed by an existing piece of music called The Grave and Beautiful Name of Sadness by Stephen Stapleton and Jeff Cox, who weirdly is co-written the Lucille Hadji Halilovic film, which is showing in Berlin very soon. It was like Popol Vuh. It was just really this kind of dark choral piece, and I could just really get into it. And it kind of, I was writing to that music, and I wrote to Stapleton to try and get his permission, and he said yes. So I got a taste for this kind of thing. I think my second film, a lot of it was just from social stuff. I was on a stag night in Nottingham.
It blew my mind when I heard you were working with broadcast.
Yeah, well, that was I was a fan anyway, but I was on a stag night in Nottingham, and one of the people on the stag night was Rog from broadcast, and it's like, oh my God, it's this guy. So I got to know him. That was 2004. So it was another 7 years until we shot it. So, you know, eventually I got to know Trish and James, but obviously that was a tragedy because Trish died. You know, I think what it was, I think the bands I was into were very much coming from, you know, they were not kind of pub rock. We're not like the Libertines, you know. No offense to that, but it just, you knew they had something else in them that could go in a different direction. They were quite pliable bands. And also, I think their references got me into other things. I think, you know, broadcast, Stereolab.
Well, they're all very much influenced by film scores themselves.
Exactly, that's the whole thing. So it was like a full circle in a sense. But, you know, I mean, I look at people like Joanna Hogg or Chantal Ackerman, no music whatsoever, and it's just wonderful and actually quite, you know, quite musical the way they edit. So I don't feel it just so happens I have used music, but I'd be very happy not to use music. I think you just kind of serve what the story needs. Yeah.
And Alex, your films to me are very indie rock, and I can't really explain why, because it's not necessarily about particular bands you reference or use. It's just a particular aesthetic there. I'd love to know if music has informed your filmmaking. I think you grew up in a bit of a musical family. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, my dad worked in radio before I was born in my whole life. Not like he was a DJ before I was born, but then, you know, just worked like in administrative radio. Still enough to get free tickets and things like that my whole life. So it was accessible, and I just, you know, growing up in the 90s, just had the radio on all the time, alternative radio. I don't really know, like, I feel like part of the problem for me, and certainly what I've been doing since Her Smell very much, is just playing catch up, because on the one hand, working in a video store when I was in college changed my life in many ways, and introduced me to many collaborators who I've made many movies with and informed a lot of my obsessions. The other problem is that it was also a record store, and it killed music for me, because I listened to every new release for 3 years, and I just increasingly hated all of it. And this is the mid to late 2000s, where every indie release just got worse and worse, just driving straight down to the bottom. And I just kind of lost interest in it, even though I lived in New York and could see everything. Just 3 years of putting on every single new release at the store, I just thought, God, this stuff sucks. Like, we're done. And I just kind of lost interest in it and became maniacally obsessed only with movies for 10 years. And then because of the inspiration striking for her smell and my desire to do a period piece set in the 90s, which full circle to Videoheaven grew out of writing a pilot, a set in a video store in the 90s that ended up going nowhere, but the research of which and my attempt to create a soundscape for it really brought me back to a place I had left behind 15 years earlier when I went to college and got into indie rock and decided like it wasn't cool to like the stuff I enjoyed in middle school anymore. And it turned out that stuff was better than ever. When I came back around to it, and then that inspired her smell, and then sort of opened up the world of making music videos with indie artists asking me to collaborate who had seen that movie or had seen Queen of Earth and responded to that. And then it's just, it's just the lane that has been there. And like,
3 of your last 4 films are about music.
Well, it's like Peter says, you get pigeonholed, but because no one ever asks me to do anything, this is the only pigeonhole I've ever been in, so I'm enjoying it because I actually get asked to do stuff. And yeah, I mean, Her Smell was like a fictional thing, and then this Ghost concert movie. Ghost are obviously a real band, but the fictional characters that exist around the band that play out in their ancillary materials are what the movie's about. And Pavement obviously is real, but we depict them in the movie, not quite literally. Yeah, I mean, I listened, but like the funny thing is, like, I could never in 1,000 years listen to Pavement while I'm writing. Even, I mean, I guess I probably did while I was writing that movie. I guess I definitely did. But the only thing I can listen to while writing is like, my wife hears when I'm listening, she's like, how on earth, like listening to like Napalm Death, and like, she's like, how on earth can you listen to this while you're writing? And I'm like, it's just a pulse that is driving me forward. Like, I'm barely listening to this, but I need like thrash and grind rock, like metal on all the time, or else like I just get up and walk away from my desk. But like this noise that I find very melodic and very relaxing does like set a metronome for me to keep working. And yeah, I just like, I have these like just endless Spotify playlists of the like loudest stuff that I'm just like, it has to be on the background for me, because otherwise like my eyes glaze off the screen. Which is I'm sure very strange to people. This is a thing that I mean, I'm glad this is a funny contrast. I feel like many of these clips are fairly different. This is a great thing for us to shake hands on. This is something most people don't care about. I mean, how indifferent are these parts of the movie most of the time?
I think every second of it is essential. It's the same with records, isn't it? The sleeve is so much part of it as well, and that's kind of lost in the age of streaming. I mean, I'm not against streaming. I think it's a great alternative if you don't have money or you can't get to the shops, but it's kind of replaced the physical side of things as well. And I think Alex and I both grew up on the iconography of these. I'm kind of slightly trailing off from your original point, sorry, but yeah.
I mean, this was a thing that the design of this moment, which is often when people are leaving the theater or turning off the movie, was sort of like the transition for me from like this mode of narrative filmmaking into what I was doing years later with Pavements, because every album that you see in that is a story that Teddy and I came up with and is a reference to something. And the stickers are all references to something meaningful. Some of them are gathered from stores I grew up going to. Some of them are from the store where I worked. And every one of those, we did like a piece for a website that was then reprinted in the Blu-ray booklet, where we explain like, this is meant to look like this album, and it's meant to be like this phase in this artist's career where you see their design has shifted from something they clearly drew themselves to now they have a designer, and now they have a record label. Like, we thought of that for everything. And I was like, this is more fun than doing the movie. Like, I should do a whole movie where all I think about is this sort of arcane.
It's like part of the script. It's like, this is what happened next. This is their really slick major label phase, and this is their punk phase.
Very clear to us. And whether that hits you or not, it just sort of washes over you and hopefully eases you out of the movie with the feeling we want. And then Pavements was defined by this desire to sort of burrow down into alternate history and create, because I mean, I'm just obsessed with, like this is such a 90s thing, and I love writers who speak about this era of like information and marketing and iconography. And like, to me, like David Foster Wallace writes a lot about the way advertising changed people's brains in the 90s. I'm just obsessed with that era of like marketing and the sort of like convergence of things. And in Pavements, we have stuff where we put them in a Got Milk ad, which maybe they didn't have here. We put Stephen Malkmus in a Macintosh ad, which in America existed for real, but it was Jimi Hendrix, Albert Einstein, Bob Dylan, people that are lesser than Stephen Malkmus by far. So we put him in one in the movie, and to me, this is just like, if you remember walking into a computer room in your school in 1999, you probably saw these posters. So therefore, putting one fake in our movie, which you see for 3 seconds, took so much thought, and that's just so much more interesting to me than like, and then you walk in this door, and then you notice this, and then that. It's like,
And I love how-
anyone can do that.
And then Stephen Malkmus walks in and he says, "Oh, this is this part. We had to sell out to make money.
Yeah.
A bit embarrassed about this part." And
Yeah, it's just more interesting to sort of rewrite history than it is to just write on a blank page something that you thought of, I think, for me right now.
so I wanted to show one more clip from you, Peter, a short film you made. And I want to ask you just a little bit about your short films, because they're so great. And they're not all that easy to find somehow, but if anyone can find them, you should. And I feel like it's sort of where you try out a lot of your more sort of surrealistic ideas. So did you want to talk a little bit about Blank Narcissus, and maybe direct people where to find it?
Well, actually, last year we compiled pretty much everything onto a box set, which took a long time to kind of source the different negatives and so on, but that's all done now. So Black Narcissus, Passion of the Swamp, that was a commission from Prototype in Australia. It was like a video art company, but there was no remit, just here is some money, do whatever you want. And I thought, great, I'm gonna do this. I don't know, I just wanted to write a love story. I was getting more into kind of romance, and just how can I write something which is still about love and loss, but in a slightly from a different perspective. And I guess during lockdown, it was a difficult lockdown. Well, I guess everyone's lockdown was difficult, but I guess I was suffering from. It's not good for a jury member to say this, but I was getting a bit narcoleptic when I was watching films. I just kept falling asleep. I just couldn't watch narrative, so I watched porn instead. So I had this little portable DVD player, and I put the headphones in, and at night I just kind of lie on the couch, fall asleep, and drift in and out of sleep. And I was watching mostly Wakefield Pool porno films. And my memory of them is it's like a miasma. It's just bits of Casey Donovan coming out in Fire Island in the sun. It's all very hazy. But I watched them with the commentary on, and it's just this. So Wakefield Pool did the commentaries as an old man, talking about the early 70s and youth and love and desire. Many of his lovers are dead. And I don't know, there's just something very beautiful about the way he spoke about great times in the early 70s. And I thought, there's something we can do here. And then I watched The Godfather. Well, I've seen it, not during lockdown, I've seen it a little bit before lockdown, but I watched it with the commentary a few years ago, and Coppola was incredibly candid. And if I remember rightly, he spoke about going to the toilet, and when he was in the cubicle, 2 crew members came in. You can see where this is going. And they were just slagging him off, saying what a shit director he is and what a shit film The Godfather's going to be, which is normal. I think all directors suffer this this stuff goes on. But what was so touching about it was he said this decades after it happened, and you could still hear that vulnerable hurt in his voice. And I thought, this is wonderful. I think I always thought, would I share my popcorn with a Brexit voter? I think it kind of inspired that scene there, and I think the answer is no, but I wouldn't share my popcorn with anyone, so it makes no difference, but yeah.
Great. So we have a bit of time now for questions from you, for either or both. So do we have a roving mic somewhere? So if you'd like to ask a question, please just raise your hand, and we'll find you. Are you all a bit in silent shock after that film? Yes, down the front. The mic's coming down.
Hey, really glad to be here and glad you're here. Thanks for all your comments so far. I've been interested recently in, as a viewer, getting a sense of community among filmmakers. I'm wondering to what degree you feel part of filmmakers' community. And Alex, you talked about how you feel when you watch a film and being able or unable to criticize it, and whether there is a communion among them and being quite established, whether you feel the urge or the responsibility to guide up-and-coming talent in any way.
I'm just kind of waiting for the other person to go first. Well, what's the community like in the UK and in Europe? We've encountered each other at maybe half a dozen festivals over the last decade.
Only on stage. We never meet each other off a stage. It's only on a stage. Yeah.
So these things happen, and then we keep in touch. That's how I know most of my friends. I mean, friends. You just encounter people around the world, and many of my friends at home who are my good friends are filmmakers, and we've known each other for over a decade, and that's very meaningful.
Yeah, I don't really. I wish I'm gonna have your social life. It sounds a lot better, actually. I don't know. Directors usually only call me when they need something. So, I don't know. What was the first part of your question? I think I can answer that a bit easier. What was that again?
I was wondering whether you feel part of a community, and if that matters when you're watching someone's film. Are you thinking I'm a consumer, or are you thinking I'm watching a colleague's work?
Well, that's a very good point. I mean, now, how I watch films is very different from the past, because before I made films, there was no jealousy or frustration. If I see something that I was about to do, it's incredibly frustrating. I remember this story about Neil Tennant. When he heard New Order's Blue Monday, he just burst into tears. I have that feeling a lot when I watch films. Yeah, I mean, I do know a few film directors, yeah. But it's, I guess, yeah, I mean, like Alex, if it's a stage, we'll hang out together, but otherwise, not really. I mean, I have two other jobs. I have a job as a writer for hire, and I teach as well. So I teach at film school. So, and not just that, but I do mentor other directors when I can, not always. So I'm constantly in touch with up-and-coming directors. I mean, even during this festival, one of them texted me at 7 a.m. saying, we lost our makeup person, help me out. So that's very interesting for me, and I've got to be very careful and mindful of being encouraging. Because, when I'm left unleashed, I'm a cynical bastard. I think Alex and we can just set each other off with our cynicism. But my job is to be very encouraging. And I think there are many good things about now, which we didn't have. I think when I think of Sean Baker, when he shot Tangerine on an iPhone, even though that's been done before, he got it out to a huge audience. And that was very a huge moment, because film, as much as I love film, it is the preserve of the middle class, and I'm one of those people, I'm sorry to say. But so the fact that it's cheaper to make films is wonderful, and it's cheaper. Well, obviously this is a long conversation, but how to get them seen is quite tricky. And I think the cost of living is a lot more prohibitive than it was when we were younger, so it's kind of swings and roundabouts.
Yeah, I mean, every good thing that's ever happened to me, professionally, every good thing has happened because someone helped me and gave me their contact, put me in touch with someone, did me a favor. And I have subsequently spent the last 15 years saying yes to as many things as I can. I need a recommendation. Could you put me in touch with someone, this producer, a festival programmer? I need a recommendation. My answer to everything is yes, because at one point I asked somebody that question, and I would be nowhere if most of those people had said no. And I take that responsibility very seriously. I also tell them you should quit and get a real job immediately. don't make the same mistakes I made, or don't watch international art cinema, watch dog shit TV and try to get a job directing it, because you'll be much richer and therefore happier, as we all know. But even here at this festival, I taught at NYU once, and one of my students, Prashant, has now had 2 films at Rotterdam, a film that won an award here a couple years ago called New Strains, and then a new film here, the name of which I don't know because I haven't seen it yet.
Removal of the eye.
The Way Full of the Eye.
Removal
of the eye. And I was just in this class, and I was being pragmatic but defeatist and saying, like, just make a movie now, make a movie, doesn't matter, just get it done and then make another one. And then a year later, he sends me a cut of something, and it's shot on consumer video. It's like maybe 68 minutes long. And he tells me it's premiering at Rotterdam. And I was like, this is terrific. This is exactly what I said you should do. This movie is incredibly interesting as like a feature made by you and your wife or partner, I don't know if they're married, in one location, and it's being supported, and I guess my advice clicked. And I'm very happy that that has worked, and now he's back with a new film. And stuff like that is important and meaningful, but community, yeah, I mean, it's there, but people don't see each other so much post-pandemic, I find. But I have many friends that I see when they're in town.
It must be strange I mean, I guess you're not swapping screeners or sending screeners, hey, check out my film, what do you think? I mean, I guess you're attending big gala festivals now, this sort of...
Yeah. Sometimes. I mean, you'd be surprised. But yeah, I mean, we also just used to go to a lot more film festivals. You have fewer responsibilities. Your movie plays at 15, you go to 13. And you meet friends and see the same people along the circuit. Now, no one has time for that. You go to maybe a few. But yeah, it's real. It's a real thing. But someone recently said, hey, I'd like to pick your brain about screenwriting. I'm thinking of leaving my job. And I said, just don't do that.
Other questions? Yes, down the front. Thank you.
Yeah, you both mentioned teaching at film school, and I just wanted to ask you what would be your advice for someone who would want to get into that career direction, as you're both very successful, and I really admire both of your work. So, yeah.
I only did it once. They just asked me to do it as a directing. Someone was on sabbatical, and they thought I could plug in nicely, and it was fine. I enjoyed it, but I had no desire to do it again because, at least in America, it's very financially unrewarding.
Are you a writer, director, both?
Ideally, I would want to be a director one day, yeah.
One day, I mean, but have you made anything, or?
I mean, I am doing something else, but I realize that I'm so much into movies, so, you know, I see so many directors who just randomly decide we're doing something else and just randomly decided that, you know, actually I'm going to do that. So I'm exploring that. That's why I'm going to all these talks right now. And yeah.
Do you have other friends who are like-minded and doing similar things, or?
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to kind of decipher so I can help. That's all. I'm not being.
I do have friends who are, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on your financial situation, but I would say. I would always say try the traditional way, you know, try and get funding, try that. If that doesn't work, don't give up. I mean, I got rejected all the time. My first feature was used from well, it's a long story, but I had an inheritance. Don't make the same mistake as me, because it opened one door to making films as a career, and it closed another door in terms of ever owning a house in Britain. And it's pretty grim. So, you know, I curse that first film. But at the same time, had I bought a house in Britain, I'd be cursing not making a film. So I think you just got to know. And, you know, you can make money from film. I didn't, but it can be possible.
Or if you bought the house, you would have made more films because you don't have to make money anymore.
That is a thing. That is a thing. No, I often think that the money from a house in Britain just doubles every few years. I mean, when I was in New York, people like Nick said, they'd kind of get a community together. They have group screenings. They'd screen, literally, they project from bars onto the street, onto, you know, brick walls, and show films. And they'd make a bit of a splash, you know, a bit of notoriety. They project in clubs, that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of chances now, especially with technology. I think there are few film directors who are still snobs, but most of us completely understand that any format is great. Even in the 1990s, you know, Sadie Benning, she was using with the Pixel Vision camera. That was seen as really lo-fi, but she kind of embraced it. She kind of really worked that aesthetic. So yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I thought your question was about getting into the path of teaching. I mean, what I said when I was teaching, and it's the opposite of what Peter said, so we'll give you 2 polls and you can find your spot in the middle, is my recommendation, funding doesn't exist in America, so I couldn't use that word and say, that's a good idea. You should try that. What I said to the class, and then Prashant has now made these films on, a camera that probably cost $100 to buy. My advice that I always said, and it's just the only advice I've ever had, is like, just do it now. Make something now that's crummy. And maybe it's like good enough that someone will do the next thing. I would rather you, who I don't know, I would rather you make a very mediocre movie that you're not entirely happy with next year than think that if you wait 5 years, you might hit the jackpot. I think that's a bad approach. I think
you never make a film you're happy with anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So like people who just wait years for everything to line up, I think this is the biggest mistake. And the greatest thing is like, your first film can be so-so, but if one person sees something in it, then that's the person that matters, and you made it for that person. And if you make it for 10 screenings with your friends at a pop-up, that's fine too. And I really encourage people to do that. I mean, my first film, as I said, was 70 minutes long, somewhat experimental. It's my dream to play it here. It never did, but now I'm here anyway, so it all worked out. But like, it just got me to the next thing, and it pushed me out the door from being someone who wanted to make films to someone who had made one. And I always say, like, you don't need money. You need, an amount of money that most people have access to, a few $1,000s at the least. You don't need connections. You don't need technical resources. You need like 5 friends. A friend who you think would look great on camera. Someone who you think would have funny chemistry with that person or erotic chemistry with that person. If you don't have the friends, it's hopeless. You will get nowhere. If you have like 5 friends that you think would show up for you for as little as a week of creative play, everything will work out. I really feel like 5 friends and like 1 month's salary of whatever menial job artists have is enough, and the friends will do the work.
Can I add one more thing? If you get rejected, don't take it personally. It happens to all of us, all the time. I had a rejection on Monday morning, I think. It's just the way it goes. Just ignore it. Keep going and keep approaching the same people. Don't see that as like it's a closed door. Just keep going.
Yeah,
it's part of the job.
It's really unbelievable how true that is and how hard that is even for friends of mine that have been doing this for over a decade. Just because you played 3 movies at a film festival doesn't mean you get a free pass, ever. It's crazy. And that's the most baffling lesson to learn, because when we grew up, that was never the case. When we grew up, they did have lifetime passes. The shittiest work by the greatest filmmakers was celebrated as though it was important. And it still is at the people that got grandfathered in, but you start at 0 every time. It's outrageous. And it just never ceases to amaze me how depressing it is. It's like people who showed Golden Exits say no to Pavements, and I'm like, do you really think that movie is better than this movie? It's like, inconceivable that one person on earth would think that, and yet those are the programming decisions.
Thank you very much.
Hope you're encouraged. Let's see. Actually, I was wondering, we're going to have to wrap up now, but I'm wondering if we can end on this clip, which is a film that is not directed by either of you, but features one of you. It's a clip from La Ultima Pellicula, which was directed by Mark Perrinson and Raya Martin, that you perform in. And I just think it's such a great way to send off this talk, and I was wondering if you wanted to say anything about this.
Michelle really took me by surprise by announcing this would happen and showing me that this clip had been procured. I don't even know how to set this up. My friends made a movie that was meant to be a remake of The American Dreamer, which is a documentary about Dennis Hopper editing his film, The Last Movie, one of my all-time favorite films. And they wanted me to come to Mexico to play a filmmaker who was in Mexico attempting to remake the last movie. And it was, I remember nothing of this experience. Nothing at all from this entire experience of making this movie. And I haven't seen one frame of this film in over a decade.
So thank you so much for coming to this. Thank you, Peter, for the clips. They're fantastic. And thank you for your questions. And I don't know if both of you have time to hover around a little bit if there are any other ones. But please thank both Peter and Alex for being here tonight. Thank you. Thank you.